The hum of the ship's engines faded into an eerie silence as Captain Elara Voss stood at the helm, her gaze fixed on the swirling abyss of the cosmic ocean. It wasn't just another mission, it was a leap into the unknown, a gamble that could either unlock the universe's deepest secrets or leave her and her crew lost forever. Behind her, the crew exchanged uneasy glances, a mix of loyalty and doubt simmering beneath the surface. They all knew the risks. The experimental warp drive had never been tested this far, and the cosmic ocean wasn't just uncharted. It was alive, pulsing with energies that defied explanation. But Alara wasn't one to back down. With a steady hand, she activated the drive, and the ship lurched forward, swallowed by the tide of swirling light. In that moment, the weight of her decision settled over her like a starless night. What lay ahead wasn't just a journey through space. It was a journey into the very heart of what it means to be human, to face the unknown, and to confront the shadows lurking within. And as the cosmic ocean closed around them, one question lingered in the air, unspoken but undeniable. Would they find answers, or would they become just another mystery lost to the tides? The Star Weaver shuddered as it emerged from the warp, its hull bathed in the ghostly glow of a shimmering nebula. The crew blinked in unison, their senses struggling to adjust to the surreal landscape before them. Time here didn't behave as it should. Moments stretched and snapped like elastic, leaving them disoriented and uneasy. Captain Elara Voss tightened her grip on the console, her sharp eyes scanning the swirling colors outside. "Run a full scan of the area," she commanded, her voice steady but edged with urgency. The ship's systems flickered, struggling to make sense of the nebula's chaotic energy. Then, amidst the static, a faint signal emerged, ancient, almost imperceptible, but undeniably real. First Mate Kale stepped forward, his usual calm demeanor replaced by a furrowed brow. "Captain, this place, it's unstable. We don't know what we're dealing with. That signal could be a trap, or worse, a distraction." His words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken tension. The crew exchanged glances, their loyalty to Alara clashing with the unease Kale's caution had stirred. Alara turned to face him, her expression resolute. "We didn't come this far to turn back at the first sign of uncertainty. That signal could be the key to everything we've been searching for." Kale's jaw tightened, his voice low but firm. "And if it's not, if this is just another dead end, or worse, a threat we can't handle, what then?" The room seemed to shrink as the two locked eyes, their disagreement echoing the larger rift between them, Alara's unwavering drive to push forward, and Kale's growing skepticism about the cost of her ambition. After a tense silence, Alara made her decision. "Plot a course toward the signal. We're not leaving until we know what's out there." The crew moved to follow her orders, but the atmosphere on the bridge had shifted. Trust, once unshakable, now felt fragile. As the Star Weaver altered its trajectory, the nebula's eerie light seemed to pulse in rhythm with the crew's apprehension. Unseen dangers loomed ahead, and with each passing moment, the weight of Alara's choice pressed harder on them all. The mission had always been a gamble, but now it felt like the stakes were higher than ever, and not just for the ship, but for the bonds holding them together. The Star Weaver glided closer to the source of the signal, its engines humming faintly against the stillness of the nebula. The crew watched in silence, as the outline of a massive, derelict alien vessel came into view. Its jagged silhouette loomed against the nebula's iridescent glow, a haunting relic of a civilization long forgotten. Alara adjusted the ship's scanners, her gaze narrowing as the readings displayed no signs of life, only the faint, rhythmic pulse of the signal they'd been chasing. "Prepare a boarding team," she ordered, her voice cutting through the tension. "We're going in." First Mate Kale hesitated, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. "Captain, we don't know what's on that ship. It could be a trap, or worse, a grave." Alara met his gaze, her expression unwavering. "If it's a grave, then we'll pay our respects. But if it holds answers, we can't afford to ignore it." The resolve in her voice left no room for debate. Moments later, Alara, Kale, and 2 other crew members suited up and crossed the void to the alien vessel, their boots clanging against its ancient hull. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the weight of centuries. The walls were etched with intricate carving symbols that seemed to shift and shimmer under their helmet lights, as if alive. Alara ran her gloved hand over the markings, her breath catching. "These aren't just decorations," she murmured. "They're a language, a story." Kale, ever the pragmatist, scanned the area with his handheld device. "A story we don't have time to decode. Let's find the source of that signal and get out of here." As they ventured deeper, the team stumbled upon a chamber bathed in a faint, blue light. At its center stood a massive console, its surface covered in more of the cryptic carvings. Above it hovered a dormant AI interface, its form sleek and otherworldly. Before anyone could react, the AI flickered to life, its voice resonating through the chamber like a low, resonant hum. "Intruders detected. Warning, the cosmic tide approaches. Depart or be consumed." Alara stepped forward, her curiosity overriding her caution. "What is the cosmic tide? What are you trying to tell us?" The AI's response was cryptic, its voice tinged with urgency. "The tide is eternal. It devours all who linger. Leave now or face oblivion." Kale grabbed Alara's arm, his grip firm. "We've seen enough. Let's go before this thing decides we're a threat." But Alara's eyes were locked on the console, her mind racing. "Not yet. There's more here. I can feel it." Ignoring Kale's protests, she activated the console, her fingers flying over the alien controls. The carvings lit up, and the chamber trembled as the AI's voice grew louder, more insistent. "Warning, system destabilization imminent. Depart immediately." The floor beneath them shuddered violently, and the walls began to crack, spilling streams of light into the chamber. "Alara, now," Kale shouted, pulling her back. Reluctantly, she followed, the team sprinting through the crumbling corridors as the alien ship groaned and splintered around them. They barely made it back to the Star Weaver, the derelict vessel collapsing into a cascade of light and debris behind them. As the ship's airlock sealed shut, the crew stood in stunned silence, their breaths heavy and hearts racing. Alara stared at the view screen, her mind replaying the AI's warning. The cosmic tide. What did it mean, and why had it seemed so desperate to drive them away? Questions swirled in her mind, but one thing was clear. Their journey had only just begun, and the answers they sought would come at a cost far greater than they'd imagined. Back on the Star Weaver, The air was thick with tension. The crew huddled around a makeshift workstation as they pieced together fragments of the alien carvings. The symbols, once indecipherable, began to form a coherent pattern under the scrutiny of the ship's linguist, Dr. Taryn Vale. Her fingers danced across the holographic display, translating the ancient script into something they could understand. "It's a warning," she said, her voice tinged with awe. "But it's also a map. These carvings speak of a guardian of the tides, a being that controls the flow of the cosmic ocean itself." Alara leaned in, her eyes alight with determination. "A guardian," she murmured, her mind racing. "If this entity exists, it could hold the answers we've been searching for. How to navigate the nebula, how to survive its tides." "This isn't just a legend, it's a key." Her voice carried a fervor that made the crew exchange uneasy glances. Kale, standing at the edge of the group, crossed his arms, his expression darkening. "Even if this guardian is real," he said, his tone measured but firm, "chasing it could be a mistake. We don't know what we're dealing with here. Obsession has a way of blinding us to the risks." His words hung in the air, a sharp contrast to Alara's unwavering resolve. She turned to face him, her jaw set, and caution has a way of keeping us stagnant. We didn't come this far to turn back now. The room fell silent, the weight of their disagreement pressing down on everyone. The rift between Alara and Kale had always been there, simmering beneath the surface, but now it threatened to crack open. The crew could feel it, the strain of leadership pulling in two directions, one driven by ambition, the other by caution. As if sensing the discord, the Starweaver shuddered, its systems flickering erratically. The lights dimmed, and the hum of the engine stuttered, replaced by an unsettling silence. Ensign Rin, the ship's engineer, frowned at her console. "Captain, the nebula's energy is interfering with our systems. It's like it's resisting us." Her voice wavered, betraying her unease. Alara straightened, her gaze sweeping the room. "We're not leaving, not yet. If the nebula is resisting, it means we're close to something important, something it doesn't want us to find." Her tone left no room for argument, but the crew's unease was palpable. Kale stepped forward, his voice low but urgent. "Alara, listen to yourself. You're risking everything, the ship, the crew, for a myth. Is this really worth it?" Her response was swift, her eyes blazing with conviction. "If it leads us to the truth, then yes, it's worth it." The room seemed to hold its breath, the tension stretching thin. Reluctantly, the crew returned to their stations, their movements stiff with apprehension. Kale lingered for a moment, his gaze fixed on Alara before turning away, his frustration evident. As the Starweaver pressed deeper into the nebula, the ship's systems continued to falter, the nebula's energy growing more hostile with each passing moment. The crew worked in uneasy silence, their trust in Alara's leadership wavering under the weight of her obsession. The guardian of the tides loomed in their minds, a figure both tantalizing and terrifying. Was it a savior, a guide, or something far more dangerous? And as the nebula tightened its grip around them, one question lingered, unspoken but undeniable. How far were they willing to go to find the answers they sought? The journey had always been a gamble, but now it felt like they were playing with stakes higher than any of them had imagined. The Starweaver had barely steadied itself, when the sensors lit up with a new threat. A colossal, swirling storm of energy, its edges crackling with raw power. It wasn't just a storm, it was alive, its movements deliberate, almost predatory. The crew stared at the view screen, their faces pale under the storm's ominous glow. Captain Elara Voss stepped forward, her eyes narrowing as she analyzed the data. "This isn't natural," she said, her voice cutting through the tension. "It's sentient. It's blocking our path for a reason." Kale stepped up beside her, his arms crossed, his expression grim. "And that reason might be to destroy us. We can't risk going through it, Alara. We need to find another way." His voice was calm, but the urgency beneath it was unmistakable. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, torn between their loyalty to Alara and the growing sense that Kale's caution might be warranted. Alara turned to face him, her jaw set. "There is no other way. The nebula's energy is closing in behind us, and this storm is the only path forward. We'll use the experimental shields. They're untested, but they're our best chance." Her tone left no room for debate, but the tension in the room was palpable. Kale's eyes locked with hers, his voice low but firm. "Untested means unpredictable. You're gambling with all our lives." For a moment, the two stood in silence, the weight of their disagreement pressing down on the crew. Then Alara straightened, her voice steady but edged with authority. "I'm the captain. This is my call. Prepare the shields and set a course through the storm." Kale hesitated, his jaw tightening, but he nodded curtly and turned to relay the orders. The crew moved into action, their movements stiff with reluctance, their trust in Alara's judgment hanging by a thread. As the Starweaver approached the storm, the experimental shields flickered to life, their shimmering energy barely visible against the storm's chaotic glow. The ship trembled as it entered the maelstrom, the shields straining under the relentless assault of energy. Inside, the crew gripped their stations, their breaths shallow as the ship rattled violently. Alarms blared, and the lights flickered, casting the bridge in erratic shadows. Alara stood at the helm, her hands gripping the console as she barked orders, her voice steady despite the chaos. But beneath her calm exterior, doubt gnawed at her. The storm was fiercer than she'd anticipated, its energy tearing at the ship's defenses. What if she'd miscalculated? What if the shields failed? She couldn't let the crew see her uncertainty. It would shatter their already fragile trust. So she held her ground, her expression unyielding, even as her mind raced with the weight of her decision. The storm raged on, the ship tossed like a leaf in a hurricane. The shields groaned under the strain, their energy fluctuating dangerously. Just as it seemed they might fail, the Starweaver burst through the storm's far edge, emerging into a pocket of eerie calm. The crew exhaled in unison, their relief tempered by the lingering tension in the air. But the calm didn't last. The storm had taken its toll. The ship's systems were damaged, and the crew's morale was frayed. Kale turned to Alara, his expression hard. "We made it, but at what cost? This can't keep happening, Alara. You're pushing us too far." His words weren't angry, but they carried a weight that made the room feel heavier. Alara met his gaze, her own resolve faltering for just a moment before she straightened. "We'll repair the damage and keep moving. The mission isn't over yet." Her words were firm, but the doubt lingered, unspoken but undeniable. The crew's trust in her leadership had been shaken, and as they moved to assess the damage, the rift between Alara and Kale, and between Alara and the crew, felt wider than ever. The storm had tested more than just the ship's shields. It had tested their unity, and the cracks were beginning to show. The Starweaver glided into orbit around a planet, cloaked in perpetual twilight. Its surface, a patchwork of shadows and faint, pulsating light. The crew gathered on the bridge, their faces illuminated by the eerie glow of the world below. "This is it," Alara said, her voice steady but tinged with anticipation. "The carvings pointed us here. Whatever answers we're looking for, they are on that planet." Kale stepped forward, his arms crossed, his expression wary. "And what if those answers come with a price? That place doesn't look welcoming. For all we know, it's a graveyard." The crew shifted uneasily, their eyes flicking between Alara and Kale. Alara's jaw tightened, but she kept her tone even. "We didn't come this far to turn back at the first sign of danger. We're landing." The descent was tense, the atmosphere thick with uncertainty. As the Starweaver touched down on the planet's surface, the crew stepped out into a landscape of crumbling ruins, their surfaces flickering with faint, rhythmic energy. The air was heavy, almost oppressive, and the faint hum of the ruins seemed to echo in their bones. Alara led the way, her steps deliberate, her eyes scanning the structures for any sign of the answers they sought. They soon came upon a massive temple-like structure, its entrance framed by towering, weathered columns. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the faint scent of ozone. At the center of the chamber stood an altar, its surface etched with the same cryptic carvings they'd seen before. Alara approached it cautiously, her hand hovering over its surface. "This is it," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is what we've been searching for." As her fingers brushed the altar, it came to life, the carvings glowing with a soft blue light. A holographic map of the cosmic ocean materialized above the altar, its intricate details shimmering in the dim light. Alara's eyes widened as she studied it. "It's a map," she said, her voice tinged with awe. "It shows the location of the guardian of the tides." But before the crew could react, the temple's walls shuddered, and the faint hum of the ruins grew louder, more menacing. Kale's voice broke through the tension. "We need to leave, now." Alara hesitated, her eyes still fixed on the map. "Not yet. We need to." Her words were cut off as the temple's defense mechanisms activated, ancient drones rising from hidden compartments in the walls. Their sleek, metallic forms moved with unnerving precision, their glowing eyes locking onto the intruders. Alara barked orders, her voice sharp with urgency. "Fall back, we need to get out of here." The crew scrambled, their movements frantic as the drones advanced. Alara and Kale fought side by side, their weapons blazing as they carved a path through the temple's defenders. But the drones were relentless, their numbers overwhelming. The crew's unity began to fray under the pressure, their trust in Alara's leadership tested as never before. As they finally broke free of the temple, the drones in pursuit, Alara's mind raced. The map had given them what they needed, but at what cost? The crew's morale was shattered, their faith in her wavering. And as the Starweaver lifted off, the drones still swarming below, Alara couldn't shake the feeling that the true cost of their journey was only beginning to reveal itself. The answers they sought were within reach, but the path to them was fraught with dangers both seen and unseen. And as the planet faded into the distance, the weight of her choices pressed down on her, heavier than ever. The Star Waver hung in the void of space, its engines idling as the crew gathered in the dimly lit briefing room. The atmosphere was thick with unease, the weight of their recent ordeal pressing down on everyone. Kale stood at one end of the table, his arms crossed, his expression grim. "We've lost too much already," he said, his voice low but firm. "The ship's damaged, the crew's exhausted, and every step forward feels like a gamble we can't afford. We need to turn back before it's too late." Alara, seated at the head of the table, met his gaze with steely resolve. Turning back isn't an option, not now. "The map we found, it's our best chance at understanding the cosmic ocean. Without it, we're just drifting, waiting for the next storm to tear us apart." Her words were calm, but the tension in her voice was unmistakable. The room erupted into murmurs, the crew's divided loyalties bubbling to the surface. Ensign Rin, her hands still trembling from the temple encounter, spoke up. "Captain, I've followed you this far, but I'm not sure I can keep going." "Not like this." Her voice wavered, and the confession seemed to echo the unspoken fears of the others. Kale nodded, his tone softening. "We're not questioning your leadership, Alara. We're questioning the cost. How much more are we willing to risk for answers that might not even exist?" Alara rose from her seat, her presence commanding the room. "I understand your fears. I share them. But if we abandon this mission now, everything we've sacrificed will have been for nothing. The guardian of the tides. It's real. And it's our only hope of surviving what's coming." She paused, her gaze sweeping the room, her voice steady but tinged with urgency. "We've come too far to give up. We owe it to ourselves, to everyone who's counting on us, to see this through." For a moment, the room was silent, the weight of her words sinking in. Then, slowly, the crew began to nod, their reluctance giving way to a fragile sense of unity. Even Kale, though his expression remained guarded, didn't object further. Alara took a deep breath, her voice firm as she issued her orders. "Set a course for the coordinates on the map. We're moving forward." As the crew dispersed to their stations, the tension lingered, a fragile truce holding them together. Alara lingered in the briefing room, her hands resting on the table as she stared at the holographic map. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with dangers they couldn't yet comprehend. But as the Star Weaver's engines hummed to life and the ship turned toward the heart of the cosmic ocean, one thing was clear: there was no turning back. The stakes were higher than ever, and the choices they made now would define not just their mission, but their very survival. The ship surged forward, its course set for the unknown. Behind them, the ruins of the planet faded into the darkness, a reminder of the cost they'd already paid. Ahead, the cosmic ocean stretched endlessly, its mysteries waiting to be unraveled. And as the crew prepared for what lay ahead, the question hung in the air, unspoken but undeniable. Would they find the answers they sought, or would the tides of the cosmos claim them before they could? The journey had always been a risk, but now it felt like they were sailing into the very heart of the storm. The Star Weaver emerged from the vast emptiness of space, into the shadow of a massive, swirling vortex. It was unlike anything the crew had ever seen, a churning maelstrom of light and energy, its edges crackling with raw, untamed power. The vortex seemed to pulse with a life of its own, as if it were the beating heart of the cosmic ocean itself. Captain Elara Voss stood at the helm, her gaze locked on the phenomenon, her expression a mix of awe and determination. "This is it," she said, her voice steady but edged with urgency. "The source of the cosmic ocean's power. We're going in." The crew exchanged uneasy glances, their apprehension palpable. First Mate Kale stepped forward, his voice low but firm. "Alara, this is insane. We don't know what's in there. The ship might not survive the strain." His words carried the weight of unspoken fears, the tension between them stretching thin. Alara turned to face him, her eyes blazing with resolve. "We didn't come this far to turn back now. This Vortex's the key to everything. We have to take the risk." Before Kale could respond, the Starweaver lurched forward, drawn into the Vortex's pull. The ship groaned under the strain, its hull shuddering as the swirling energy enveloped them. Inside, the crew braced themselves, their breaths shallow as the world outside the viewscreen dissolved into a chaotic blur of light and shadow. The laws of physics seemed to unravel, time and space bending in ways that defied comprehension. The familiar hum of the engines was replaced by an eerie silence, broken only by the faint, almost imperceptible whispers that seemed to echo through the ship. Then the visions began. Ensign Rin was the first to falter, her hands trembling as she stared at her console. I see them," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "The ones we lost. They're here." Her eyes were wide with fear, her face pale under the flickering lights. Around her, the crew began to experience their own hallucinations, vivid, haunting images that seemed to pull them into their deepest fears and regrets. Kale clenched his fists, his jaw tightening as he fought to maintain his composure. "It's the Vortex," he said, his voice strained. "It's messing with our minds. We need to shut it out." But Alara was already lost in her own vision. She stood frozen at the helm, her eyes fixed on the swirling chaos outside, but in her mind, she was somewhere else entirely. She saw the faces of her former crew, their expressions etched with pain and betrayal. The memory of a past mission, one that had ended in tragedy, played out before her, vivid and unrelenting. The guilt she had buried deep within herself surged to the surface, overwhelming her with a flood of emotions she had long tried to suppress. "This is my fault," she murmured, her voice trembling. "I should have saved them. I should have done more." The visions grew more intense, threatening to consume them all. The crew struggled to hold onto their sanity, their unity fraying under the weight of their shared torment. Kale grabbed Alara's arm, his grip firm. "Alara, snap out of it. This isn't real. It's just the Vortex trying to break us. We need to focus." His voice cut through the haze, pulling her back to the present. She blinked, her breathing ragged, but her resolve hardened. "You're right," she said, her voice steadying. "We can't let it win. We have to push through." With a deep breath, Alara turned back to the viewscreen, her eyes narrowing as she studied the Vortex's chaotic energy. "The Guardian is here," she said, her voice firm. "I can feel it. We're close." Her determination seemed to anchor the crew, their fear giving way to a fragile sense of purpose. Together, they pressed forward, the Star Weaver navigating the surreal realm with a mix of caution and resolve. But the Vortex wasn't finished with them. The visions returned, more vivid and relentless than before, each one a test of their willpower. Alara's guilt, Kale's doubts, the crew's deepest fears. All of it was laid bare, a crucible that threatened to break them. Yet, amidst the chaos, Alara's unwavering determination shone like a beacon, guiding them forward. She knew the cost of turning back, the price of giving in to fear. And as the Star Weaver pushed deeper into the Vortex, one thing became clear. The path to the Guardian wasn't just a physical journey. It was a trial of the soul, a test of their ability to confront the shadows within themselves and emerge stronger. The ship trembled as it pressed onward, the Vortex's energy growing more intense with each passing moment. The crew clung to their stations, their resolve tested but unbroken. Ahead, the swirling chaos seemed to shift, the faint outline of something massive and otherworldly coming into view. Alara's heart pounded in her chest, her breath catching as she realized what it was. "There," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The Guardian, we've found it." But as the Star Weaver drew closer, the visions intensified, the Vortex's grip on their minds tightening. The crew's unity, their trust in Alara's leadership, and their own inner strength would all be tested as never before. The journey had always been a gamble, but now, as they stood on the brink of discovery, the stakes had never been higher. The answer to the cosmic ocean's mysteries was within reach, but the cost of uncovering it might be more than any of them were prepared to pay. The Star Weaver shuddered violently as it broke free from the Vortex, the chaotic swirl of light and energy giving way to an expanse of profound stillness. The crew blinked in unison, their senses overwhelmed by the sudden shift. Before them stretched a vast, tranquil void, its darkness punctuated by faint glimmers of starlight that seemed to pulse with a quiet, otherworldly rhythm. The tension on the bridge was palpable, every breath held as they took in the surreal calm of this new realm. And then it appeared, rising from the void like a constellation given form. The Guardian of the Tides materialized before them, a colossal, ethereal being composed of swirling starlight and shimmering energy. Its presence was both awe-inspiring and unsettling, radiating a power that seemed to transcend the very fabric of the universe. The crew stared in stunned silence, their voices caught in their throats as the Guardian's gaze settled on the ship. Its voice resonated through the void, deep and resonant, yet somehow gentle. "You have journeyed far, seekers of truth, but truth is a burden not all are prepared to bear." The words hung in the air, their meaning cloaked in riddles. Alara stepped forward, her hands gripping the edge of the console as she met the Guardian's gaze. "We've come for answers," she said, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "The cosmic ocean. What is it? Why does it resist us?" The Guardian's form shifted, its starlight body rippling like water. "The cosmic ocean is both a question and an answer, a beginning and an end. To understand it, you must first understand yourselves." Its voice carried a haunting wisdom, each word a challenge, a test. Alara frowned, her mind racing. "We've faced trials, we've sacrificed. What more must we do?" The Guardian's response was measured, its tone almost sorrowful. "The greatest trial lies ahead. You stand at a crossroads, Captain Elara Voss. You may leave now, return to the safety of your known world, and live in peace. Or you may delve deeper, embrace the unknown, and risk all you hold dear for the chance to unlock the ocean's secrets. The choice is yours. The words struck like a physical blow, the weight of the decision settling heavily over the bridge. Alara's heart pounded as she glanced at her crew, their faces a mix of fear, exhaustion, and hope. She could see the toll the journey had taken on them, the frayed edges of their unity, the cracks in their trust. But she also saw the spark of curiosity, the same drive that had brought them this far. Kale stepped forward, his voice low but urgent. "Alara, this is madness. We've lost enough already. If we go further, we might not make it back." His words were a plea, a reminder of the cost they'd already paid. Alara turned to him, her expression torn. And if we turn back now, what was it all for? The sacrifices, the risks, were they for nothing? The room fell silent, the tension between them crackling like a live wire. Kale's jaw tightened, his voice edged with frustration. "You're gambling with our lives, Alara. This isn't just about you, it's about all of us." His words cut deep, but Alara's resolve didn't waver. She turned back to the Guardian, her voice firm. "We're staying. We'll face whatever comes." The Guardian's form rippled, its starlight glowing brighter. "Your choice is made, but know this. The path ahead will test you in ways you cannot yet comprehend. The cosmic ocean does not yield its secrets lightly." With that, the Guardian began to fade, its form dissolving into the void, leaving the crew alone once more. As the Star Weaver hovered in the tranquil expanse, the weight of Alara's decision pressed down on everyone. Kale turned away, his frustration evident, his trust in her leadership fractured. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, their unity fraying further under the strain. Alara stood at the helm, her gaze fixed on the void ahead, her mind racing with the enormity of what lay before them. The choice had been made, but the consequences were only beginning to unfold. The Guardian's words echoed in her mind, a haunting reminder of the trials to come. The cosmic ocean's mysteries were within reach, but the cost of uncovering them was a burden she would have to bear, not just for herself, but for her crew. And as the ship prepared to press forward, the question lingered, unspoken but undeniable. Would they find the answers they sought, or would the tides of the cosmos claim them before they could? The journey had always been a risk, but now it felt like they were sailing into the very heart of the storm. The Star Weaver hung suspended in the void, the silence of the cosmos pressing in like a weight. The Guardian's words lingered in the air, their meaning sinking into the crew like a stone dropped into still water. The cosmic ocean is not merely a phenomenon, it had said, its voice echoing with a depth that seemed to span eons. It is alive. It breathes, it thinks, and it tests those who dare to seek its wisdom. To understand its tides is to understand yourself, and not all who enter its depths are prepared for what they find. Alara stood at the helm, her hands gripping the console as she processed the Guardian's revelation. The cosmic ocean was alive. It had been testing them all along, not just their skills or their courage, but their very essence. The realization sent a shiver down her spine, but it also ignited a flicker of determination. They hadn't come this far to turn back now. The Guardian's voice returned, quieter this time, but no less commanding. To prove your worthiness, you must complete a trial. But know this, failure will mean the destruction of your ship, your crew, and all you hold dear. Do you accept this challenge? Alara didn't hesitate. We accept. Her voice was steady, but the weight of her words settled heavily over the bridge. Kale turned to her, his expression a mix of disbelief and frustration. Alara, you're gambling with our lives, again. His tone was sharp, but beneath it, there was a thread of something else. Fear, maybe, or exhaustion. She met his gaze, her resolve unwavering. We don't have a choice. If we don't complete this trial, we're as good as dead anyway. This is our only chance. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, their trust in her leadership hanging by a thread, but no one argued. They had come too far to turn back now. The trial began without warning. The void around the Star Weaver shifted, the tranquil expanse giving way to a swirling maelstrom of light and shadow. The ship lurched violently, its systems flickering as the first challenge unfolded. A holographic projection filled the bridge, its form shifting and shimmering, taking on the shape of their worst fears. For Alara, it was the faces of her former crew, their eyes filled with accusation. For Kale, it was the image of the ship breaking apart, his hands unable to save it. For the others, it was their own personal demons, their deepest regrets and failures brought to life before them. The Guardian's voice echoed through the chaos. The first trial is one of unity. Face your fears together, or be consumed by them. Alara barked orders, her voice cutting through the rising panic. Focus on each other. Don't let the projections take hold. But the crew was already faltering, their unity fraying under the weight of their shared torment. Kale fought to maintain his composure, his hands gripping the console so tightly, his knuckles turned white. "We can't do this, Alara," he said, his voice strained. "This is too much." She turned to him, her eyes blazing. "We don't have a choice. If we fall apart now, we lose everything. Trust me." Her words were a plea as much as a command, and for a moment, Kale hesitated. Then, reluctantly, he nodded. Together, they pushed through the first trial, their combined strength driving back the projections, but the cost was high. The crew's morale was shattered, their trust in Alara's leadership tested as never before. As the maelstrom faded and the void returned, the Guardian's voice echoed once more. "You have passed the first trial, but the challenges ahead will test more than your unity. They will test your courage, your faith, and your very will to survive." The second trial began almost immediately. The Star Weaver was plunged into darkness, the ship's systems failing one by one. The air grew cold, the silence oppressive. A faint hum filled the void, growing louder with each passing moment. It was a sound that seemed to resonate in their bones, a primal, instinctive fear that sent shivers down their spines. "The second trial is one of courage," the Guardian intoned. "Face the unknown, or be consumed by it." Alara's mind raced as she tried to make sense of the challenge. "Stay calm," she said, her voice steady despite the rising tension. "We've faced worse than this. We'll find a way through," but her words felt hollow even to her. The crew's trust in her was wavering, their faith in her leadership tested by the relentless trials. As the darkness deepened and the hum grew louder, the crew's resolve began to crack. Ensign Rin was the first to break, her voice trembling as she whispered, "I can't do this. I can't." Alara turned to her, her tone softening. "You're stronger than you think." "We all are. We'll get through this together." But the words felt like a bandage over a wound that was bleeding out. The trials were pushing them to their limits, and with each challenge, the cracks in their unity grew wider. Alara knew that if they didn't find a way to come together, to trust each other and themselves, they wouldn't survive the next trial. As the darkness began to recede, the faint glimmer of starlight returning to the void, the Guardian's voice echoed once more. "You have passed the second trial, but the greatest challenge lies ahead. The final trial will test your faith, not just in yourselves, but in each other. Prepare yourselves, seekers of truth, for the cosmic ocean does not yield its secrets lightly." The crew stood in silence, their breaths shallow, their minds reeling from the trials they had already faced. Alara's heart pounded in her chest, her resolve tempered by the weight of what lay ahead. They had come this far, but the journey was far from over. The final trial loomed before them, a test that would push them to their breaking point and beyond. The cosmic ocean's mysteries were within reach, but the cost of uncovering them was a burden they would have to bear together, or not at all. The Star Weaver floated in the void, its crew battered and exhausted from the relentless trials. The final challenge loomed before them, its nature unclear, but its weight palpable. The Guardian's voice echoed through the bridge, its tone both solemn and commanding. "The last trial is one of sacrifice. To prove your worthiness, you must confront what you fear most, and choose wisely." Alara's heart clenched at the words. Before she could respond, the ship's systems flickered, and the bridge dissolved into a scene from her past. She was back on the deck of her old ship, the Eclipse, moments before disaster struck. The air was thick with smoke, alarms blaring, and the faces of her former crew filled with panic. She tried to speak, to command them, but her voice was swallowed by the chaos. The memory played out exactly as it had before her hesitation, her failure to act, the ship breaking apart, and her crew lost to the void. But this time, something was different. The Guardian's voice cut through the memory, calm but unyielding. "You cannot change the past, but you can learn from it. What will you do now?" Alara blinked, and the scene shifted. She was back on the Star Weaver, but the ship was in crisis. A section of the hull had collapsed, trapping Kale in a rapidly depressurizing compartment. The crew scrambled to contain the damage, but it was clear. Saving Kale would mean abandoning the trial. Alara froze, the weight of the choice pressing down on her. The mission, the answers they had fought so hard to find, was within reach. But so was Kale, his voice crackling over the comms, strained but steady. "Leave me. Finish the trial. The mission comes first." His words hit her like a punch to the gut. She thought of the Eclipse, of the lives she had lost because she had hesitated. She thought of the crew around her now, their trust in her hanging by a thread. And in that moment, she realized the truth. Her obsession with the mission had blinded her to the needs of her team. She had been so focused on proving herself, on finding answers, that she had forgotten what truly mattered. "I'm not leaving you," she said, her voice firm. Not this time. The crew turned to her, their expressions a mix of surprise and relief. Together, they worked to stabilize the collapsing section, their movements frantic but coordinated. Alara led the charge, her hands steady as she guided them through the chaos. When Kale was finally pulled to safety, the tension on the bridge eased, but the cost was clear. The trial was over. They had failed. The Guardian's voice filled the silence, its tone softer now. You have chosen wisely, Captain Elara Voss. Sacrifice is not a sign of weakness, but of strength. You have proven your worthiness not through victory, but through selflessness. The void around the Star Weaver shimmered, the oppressive weight of the trials lifting. The ship's systems stabilized, and the crew exhaled in unison, their relief palpable. Alara stood at the helm, her shoulders heavy with the weight of what she had learned. The mission had always been about more than answers. It was about the people who had trusted her to lead them. The Guardian's voice returned one final time, its words carrying a warning. You have earned passage out of the cosmic ocean, but remember this: the tides will always test those who seek their power. The journey does not end here. As the Star Weaver began its journey home, the crew gathered on the bridge, their unity restored. Alara looked at them, her heart swelling with gratitude and resolve. They had faced the unknown together, and in the end, they had found something far more valuable than answers. They had found each other. The ship glided through the void, the cosmic ocean's mysteries still shrouded in shadow. But as the crew prepared for the journey ahead, one thing was certain: whatever challenges awaited them, they would face them together. The tides might always test them, but they had proven that they could weather any storm, not as individuals, but as a team. And so, with the stars stretching endlessly before them, the Star Weaver sailed on, its crew stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever lay ahead. The Star Weaver drifted through the calm expanse of space, the chaotic energies of the cosmic ocean fading into the distance behind them. The ship's systems hummed steadily, a stark contrast to the turmoil that had defined their journey. On the bridge, Captain Elara Voss stood silently, her gaze fixed on the stars ahead. The weight of everything they had endured, the trials, the sacrifices, the moments of doubt, settled heavily on her shoulders. But amidst the exhaustion, there was something else: clarity. She turned to face her crew, their faces reflecting the same weariness and resilience she felt. Kale stood nearby, his usual stoic expression softened by the faintest hint of relief. Alara took a deep breath, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "I owe you all an apology," she began, her words cutting through the quiet. "I was so focused on finding answers, on proving myself, that I lost sight of what really matters: this crew. This family." Kale's eyes met hers, his expression unreadable at first. But then, slowly, he nodded, a silent acknowledgement of her words. Alara continued, her tone earnest. "I made mistakes. I pushed us too far, too fast, and I put the mission above the people who make it possible. That's not the kind of leader I want to be. Not anymore." The crew listened in silence, their faces reflecting a mix of surprise and understanding. Ensign Rin, who had once been on the verge of breaking, stepped forward, her voice soft but firm. "We followed you because we believed in you, Captain, even when it was hard, and now we believe in you even more." Alara's heart swelled at the words, but it was Kale who spoke next, his tone measured but sincere. "You've always had the strength to lead, Alara. What you've found now is the wisdom to lead well." His words carried a weight that resonated deeply, and for the first time, in what felt like an eternity, the tension between them dissolved. The crew gathered closer, their unity restored, their trust in Alara renewed. She looked at them, her gratitude evident in her eyes. "This journey changed us," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "It tested us in ways we never imagined, but it also showed us what we're capable of, not just as a crew, but as a team, as a family." As the Star Weaver charted its course for home, the atmosphere on the bridge shifted. The weight of the trials they had faced no longer felt like a burden, but a foundation, a reminder of what they had overcome together. Alara felt a newfound sense of purpose, not just as a leader, but as someone who had learned the value of humility, compassion, and trust. The cosmic ocean had been a crucible, shaping her into the person she was always meant to be. The ship glided smoothly through the stars, the crew working together with a quiet, steady confidence. Alara stood at the helm, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The journey had been long and fraught with danger, but it had also been a journey of growth. For her, for Kale, for every member of the crew. They were no longer just survivors of the cosmic ocean. They were its students, shaped by its tides and tempered by its trials. As the Star Weaver sailed on, Alara felt a sense of peace settle over her. The answers they had sought were still out there, waiting to be discovered. But for now, she knew one thing for certain: whatever lay ahead, they would face it together, not as individuals, but as a team. And that, she realized, was the greatest discovery of all. The Star Weaver glided through the quiet expanse of space, its crew finally able to breathe after the harrowing trials of the cosmic ocean. The ship's systems hummed steadily, a comforting reminder of their hard-won survival. But the cosmos, as they had learned, was rarely kind to those who sought its secrets. Without warning, the ship's sensors blared to life, a cacophony of alarms shattering the calm. Alara snapped to attention, her eyes darting to the view screen. "Report," she barked, her voice sharp with urgency. Ensign Rin's hands flew across her console, her face pale. "Multiple contacts, Captain. Alien ships. Fast and heavily armed. They're closing in." The screen flickered as a swarm of sleek, angular vessels appeared, their hulls glinting ominously in the starlight. The fleet moved with precision, their formation tightening as they closed the distance. Kale stepped forward, his expression grim. "They're drawn to the energy signature of the cosmic ocean. We're a beacon out here." His tone was calm, but the tension in his voice was unmistakable. Alara's mind raced, her thoughts turning to the Guardian's cryptic words. The ocean's power was both a gift and a curse, a prize that others would kill to possess. "Options?" she asked, her voice steady despite the rising tension. Kale shook his head. "We're outgunned and outnumbered. Direct engagement isn't an option." The crew exchanged uneasy glances, their hard-earned unity tested once again. Alara's gaze hardened as an idea took shape. "The experimental warp drive," she said, her voice cutting through the tension. "We can use it to create a diversion. If we overload its core, we can generate a burst of energy strong enough to disorient their sensors. It might buy us enough time to slip away." Kale's eyes narrowed. "That drive is unstable. Overloading it could cripple the ship. Or worse." Alara met his gaze, her resolve unwavering. "Do you have a better idea?" The room fell silent, the weight of her words settling over everyone. With no other options, the crew sprang into action. Rin and Kale worked furiously to recalibrate the warp drive, their movements precise despite the urgency. Alara monitored the alien fleet's approach, her heart pounding as the distance between them shrank. "We're running out of time," she warned, her voice tight with tension. Finally, with a nod from Kale, the plan was set. Alara took a deep breath, her hand hovering over the console. "On my mark," she said, her voice steady. 3, 2, 1, now. The Starweaver shuddered violently as the warp drive surged, its core glowing with an intense, blinding light. A shockwave of energy rippled through space, distorting the alien ship's sensors and throwing their formation into chaos. The crew held their breath as the enemy vessels faltered, their movements becoming erratic. "Now, full thrusters. Get us out of here," Alara commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. The ship surged forward, its engines straining as it raced away from the fleet. The crew worked in tense silence, their focus unwavering as they navigated through the chaos. For a moment, it seemed like they might actually make it. But then, the warp drive's core began to sputter, its energy fading rapidly, the drives failing. Rin shouted, her voice tinged with panic. "We're losing power." Alara's heart sank as the ship's systems flickered, the warp drive's overload taking its toll. The Starweaver slowed, its engines sputtering as it drifted into the void. The alien fleet, though momentarily disoriented, was already regaining its bearings. Kale turned to Alara, his expression grim. "We're stranded. The drive's dead, and we're too far from any known systems to make it home on thrusters alone." The weight of his words settled over the bridge, the crew's hard-won unity tested once again. Alara closed her eyes for a moment, the gravity of their situation pressing down on her. But when she opened them, her resolve was unshaken. "We've faced worse," she said, her voice firm. "We'll find a way, we always do." As the crew worked to stabilize the ship, Alara's mind raced with possibilities. The journey had always been about more than just finding answers. It was about proving that they could overcome any obstacle, no matter how insurmountable it seemed. And as the Starweaver drifted through the void, its crew battered but unbroken, one thing was clear: their greatest challenge still lay ahead. The alien fleet loomed in the distance, their intentions clear. But Alara knew that as long as her crew stood together, they had a fighting chance. The tides of the cosmos had tested them before, and they had emerged stronger. This time would be no different. The Starweaver hung in the void, its engines silent and its systems flickering weakly. The alien fleet loomed in the distance, their movements growing more deliberate as they closed in. Inside the ship, the crew worked with a quiet urgency, their hands moving swiftly over consoles and tools as they scrambled to repair the damaged warp drive. The air was thick with tension, the weight of their precarious situation pressing down on everyone. Alara moved among them, her voice steady but firm. "We don't have time for doubts," she said, her eyes scanning the room. "We've faced worse than this. Remember the trials. We survived because we worked together. We can do it again." Her words carried a quiet strength, a reminder of the resilience they had shown in the face of the cosmic ocean's challenges. The crew nodded, their determination reignited, but the strain was evident in their expressions. Resources were scarce. Spare parts were cobbled together from whatever they could salvage, and every tool was pressed into service. Kale and Rin worked side by side at the warp drive's core, their movements precise but hurried. "We're missing a critical component," Rin said, her voice tight with frustration. "Without it, the drive won't hold." Alara stepped forward, her mind racing. "What about the secondary power grid? Could we reroute its energy to stabilize the core?" Kale frowned, considering the idea. "It's risky. If the grid overloads, we'll lose life support." The crew exchanged uneasy glances, but Alara's resolve didn't waver. "We don't have a choice. Do it." The crew worked with renewed focus, their movements synchronized as they rerouted the power grid. The ship groaned under the strain, its systems flickering erratically. But slowly, painstakingly, the warp drive began to stabilize. The process was grueling, every second stretched thin as the alien fleet drew closer. As the final connections were made, the warp drive hummed to life, its core glowing with a steady, reassuring light. The crew exhaled in unison, their relief palpable. "We've got power," Kale confirmed, his voice tinged with cautious optimism. "But it's fragile. We'll need to move quickly." Alara nodded, her gaze sweeping the bridge. "Prepare for warp. Let's get out of here." The crew moved into position, their hands steady as they prepared the ship for its escape. But just as they were about to engage the drive, a faint signal crackled over the comms, a sound unlike anything they had heard before. It was rhythmic, almost melodic, but laced with an otherworldly resonance that sent shivers down their spines. "Captain," Rin said, her voice hushed. "It's coming from the cosmic ocean. It's calling to us." The crew fell silent, their attention drawn to the signal. Alara's heart raced as she listened, her mind flashing back to the Guardian's cryptic words. This was no ordinary transmission. It was a message, a clue to something greater. Kale turned to her, his expression tense. "We need to leave, now. Whatever that signal is, it's not worth the risk." His words were a stark reminder of the danger they were in, but Alara hesitated. The cosmic ocean had tested them, taught them, and now it seemed to be offering them one final mystery. For a moment, she was torn. The scientist in her yearned to follow the signal, to uncover the secrets it might hold, but the captain in her knew better. She looked at her crew, their faces etched with exhaustion and fear, and made her decision. "We're leaving," she said, her voice firm. "Our priority is getting home." The signal, "It'll have to wait." Her words were met with a mix of relief and quiet respect. The crew returned to their stations, their focus unwavering as they prepared to warp. As the Star Weaver surged forward, the signal faded into the void, its mystery lingering like an unanswered question. Alara stood at the helm, her gaze fixed on the stars ahead. The journey had changed her, taught her the value of balance between curiosity and caution, between ambition and responsibility. She had faced the unknown, and in the end, she had chosen her crew over the allure of discovery. It was a choice that marked a turning point, not just for her, but for all of them. As the ship hurtled through the stars, the crew felt a sense of closure, a quiet acknowledgement of what they had endured and what they had gained. The cosmic ocean's mysteries would remain, its tides forever calling to those brave enough to seek them. But for now, the Star Weaver sailed on, its crew united and stronger than ever, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The Star Weaver emerged from the warp into familiar space, its battered hull glinting under the light of a nearby star. The crew exhaled in unison, their relief palpable as the chaotic energies of the cosmic ocean faded behind them. But their return was far from quiet. News of their journey had spread like wildfire through the galaxy, their discoveries and survival against impossible odds, turning them into legends. When they docked at the central hub of the Galactic Coalition, they were met with cheers and applause. Crowds gathered to catch a glimpse of the ship and its crew, their faces filled with awe and admiration. Alara stood at the forefront, her posture straight but her expression humble. She had never sought fame, and the attention felt overwhelming. Yet as she looked at her crew, Kale, Rin, and the others, she felt a deep sense of pride. They had earned this moment together. The Coalition wasted no time in honoring them. A grand ceremony was held, medals awarded, and speeches given about the bravery and ingenuity of the Star Weaver's crew. But the most surprising moment came when Alara was offered a prestigious position, command of a state-of-the-art expeditionary fleet tasked with exploring the farthest reaches of the galaxy. It was the kind of opportunity most captains could only dream of: resources, recognition, and the chance to make history. The room fell silent as Alara stepped forward to respond. Her voice was steady but carried a quiet weight. "I'm deeply honored," she began, "but I must decline." A murmur of surprise rippled through the crowd. She continued, her tone resolute. "The Star Weaver and its crew are my family. We've faced the unknown together, and I can't imagine continuing this journey without them. My place is with my team, exploring on our own terms." The room was stunned into silence, but the crew exchanged knowing glances. They had seen Alara's transformation firsthand, from a leader driven by ambition to one who valued her team above all else. Kale, standing at the edge of the group, watched her with a mixture of surprise and respect. The Alara he had known before would have jumped at the chance for glory. But this Alara, the one who had weathered the trials of the cosmic ocean and emerged wiser, was different. She had found her true north. The Coalition's officials, though taken aback, respected her decision. Alara's humility and dedication earned her a new kind of respect, one rooted not in accolades, but in the quiet strength of her leadership. As the ceremony concluded, the crew returned to the Star Weaver, the weight of their newfound fame settling over them like a second skin. Back on the ship, Alara gathered her team in the briefing room. "We've been given a rare gift," she said, her voice warm but firm, "the freedom to chart our own course. The galaxy is vast, and there's still so much to discover, but this time we'll do it together, not as heroes, but as explorers, as a family." Kale stepped forward, his usual reserve softened by a rare smile. "You've come a long way, Captain, and for what it's worth, I'm proud to serve under your command." The crew nodded in agreement, their trust in Alara unshakable. As the Star Weaver prepared to depart once more, Alara stood at the helm, her gaze fixed on the stars ahead. The journey had changed her in ways she couldn't have imagined, but it had also reaffirmed what truly mattered. The mysteries of the cosmos would always call to her, but now she knew the answer wasn't just in the stars. It was in the people who stood beside her. With a quiet command, the ship surged forward, its course uncharted, but its purpose clear. The Star Weaver was no longer just a vessel. It was a symbol of unity, resilience, and the boundless potential of those who dared to explore the unknown. And as the stars stretched endlessly before them, Alara and her crew sailed on, ready to write the next chapter of their story, together. Months had passed since the Star Weaver returned from the cosmic ocean, its crew forever changed by the trials they had endured. The ship had been repaired, its scars polished away, but the lessons learned, and the bonds forged remained etched into its very soul. Now, as they prepared for a new mission, the atmosphere on the bridge was different. There was a quiet confidence, a sense of purpose that had been absent before. Alara stood at the helm, her gaze steady as she reviewed the mission parameters. This wasn't just another expedition. It was a chance to prove that they could face the unknown together, stronger and wiser than ever. The mission began as many others had: routine scans, long stretches of quiet, the steady hum of the ship's engines filling the void. But then, something unexpected appeared on the sensors. A faint, pulsing anomaly, its energy signature unlike anything they had encountered before. Alara leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as she studied the readings. "This can't be right," she murmured, her voice tinged with both curiosity and caution. Kale stepped up beside her, his usual calm demeanor masking the flicker of unease in his eyes. "That signature, it's familiar, almost like the cosmic ocean, but different, more refined." His words hung in the air, the implications sinking in. If the anomaly was connected to the ocean, it meant that its reach and its mysteries extended far beyond the nebula they had barely survived. Alara's first instinct was to dive in, to unravel the anomaly's secrets, as she had done so many times before. But then she paused, her hand hovering over the console. She thought of the trials, of the cost of her decisions, and of the trust her crew had placed in her. This wasn't just her journey anymore, it was theirs. She turned to the crew, her voice steady but tinged with genuine humility. "This is bigger than any one of us. I need your input. Do we investigate, or do we move on?" The room fell silent, the weight of the decision settling over everyone. Rin was the first to speak, her voice soft but resolute. "We've come this far. Whatever's out there, it's part of our story. We owe it to ourselves to see it through." Kale nodded, his expression thoughtful. "It's a risk, but so was everything else we've faced, and we've always come out stronger on the other side." The rest of the crew murmured their agreement, their trust in Alara and in each other unshakable. Alara felt a swell of gratitude, her heart buoyed by their unity. "Then it's settled," she said, her voice firm. "We'll approach cautiously, but we'll see this through together." The Star Weaver adjusted its course, its trajectory aimed squarely at the anomaly. As they drew closer, the energy signature grew stronger, its pulses more rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. The crew worked in unison, their movements precise and deliberate, their focus unbroken. When they reached the anomaly, the sight took their breath away. It was a swirling vortex of light and shadow, its edges crackling with energy that seemed to hum with a life of its own. But unlike the chaotic maelstroms of the cosmic ocean, this anomaly was calm, ordered, almost inviting. Alara stared at the vortex, her mind racing with possibilities. "This isn't random," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's a gateway, a doorway to something beyond." The crew exchanged glances, their curiosity mingling with a quiet sense of awe. Kale stepped forward, his voice steady but tinged with caution. "If it's a gateway, we need to be careful. We don't know where it leads, or what's waiting for us on the other side." Alara nodded, her resolve hardening. "We'll proceed with caution, but whatever we find, we'll face it together." As the Star Weaver prepared to enter the anomaly, the crew felt a sense of anticipation that was almost electric. This wasn't just another mission. It was a continuation of the journey that had shaped them, tested them, and brought them closer than ever. And as the ship crossed the threshold, swallowed by the Vortex's swirling light, one thing was certain: the cosmic ocean's mysteries were far from over. The anomaly closed behind them, the void returning to its usual stillness. But the Star Weaver and its crew were no longer the same. They had faced the unknown before, and they would face it again, not as individuals, but as a team. And wherever the anomaly led, they would face it together, their unity, their greatest strength. The Star Weaver emerged from the anomaly's swirling light into a region of space that defied all expectations. The stars here were arranged in patterns that seemed deliberate, their light casting an otherworldly glow over the vast expanse. But what truly captured the crew's attention were the structures, massive, ancient relics floating in the void, their surfaces etched with the same cryptic carvings they had seen before. These weren't random debris. They were the remnants of a civilization that had once thrived in the heart of the cosmic ocean. Alara stepped closer to the view screen, her eyes wide with awe. This changes everything," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. The crew gathered around her, their expressions a mix of wonder and unease. The discovery was staggering, a glimpse into a past that had long been lost to time. But it also raised questions that threatened to unravel everything they thought they knew about the cosmic ocean. Kale was the first to break the silence, his tone cautious but curious. "If this civilization existed here, why did it fall, and what does it have to do with the tides?" His words hung in the air, heavy with implications. The cosmic ocean had always been a force of mystery, its tides both a source of power and a harbinger of danger. But now it seemed there was more to it, much more. Alara turned to the crew, her voice steady but tinged with urgency. "We need to investigate. Whatever happened here, it's connected to the ocean. And if we're going to understand it, we need to learn from those who came before us." The crew nodded, their resolve hardening as they prepared to explore the relics. The first artifact they approached was a massive obelisk, its surface covered in intricate carvings that seemed to shift and shimmer under the ship's lights. Rin worked quickly to scan the structure, her hands flying over the console as she deciphered the symbols. "It's a record," she said, her voice filled with awe. "A chronicle of their history. They called themselves the Tideborn, a civilization that rose and fell with the tides of the cosmic ocean." The crew listened in silence as Rin translated the carvings, the story unfolding before them. The Tideborn had been masters of the ocean, harnessing its energy to build a thriving society, but their power came at a cost. The tides, they had learned, were a force of both creation and destruction. They could give life, but they could also take it away. And in the end, the Tideborn had been consumed by the very force they had sought to control. Alara's mind raced as she absorbed the information. The tides weren't just a natural phenomenon. They were a living, breathing force, a reflection of the universe's dual nature. It was a revelation that deepened her understanding of the ocean, but also raised new dangers. If the tides could destroy a civilization as advanced as the Tideborn, what hope did they have? Kale's voice broke through her thoughts, his tone measured but firm. This changes our approach. We can't just navigate the ocean, we need to understand it. And if the tides are as dangerous as they seem, we need to be prepared for the consequences. Elara nodded, her resolve hardening. You're right. This isn't just about exploration anymore. It's about survival. And if we're going to make it through this, we need to learn from the Tideborn's mistakes. The crew set to work, piecing together the fragments of the Tideborn's history. Each artifact they examined revealed new insights, new clues about the nature of the tides. But with each discovery, the danger grew more palpable. The ocean wasn't just a force to be reckoned with, it was a force to be respected. As the Star Weaver drifted among the relics, Alara felt a sense of both awe and trepidation. They were standing on the edge of something vast and incomprehensible, a mystery that stretched beyond the stars. And as the crew prepared to delve deeper into the Tideborn's legacy, one thing was clear: the journey ahead would test them in ways they couldn't yet imagine. The cosmic ocean had always been a source of wonder and fear, a force that defied understanding. But now, as they uncovered the secrets of the Tideborn, Alara and her crew were beginning to see it for what it truly was: a reflection of the universe itself, beautiful and terrible in equal measure. And as the ship moved forward, its course set for the unknown, the crew knew that the tides would always be with them, a reminder of the delicate balance between creation and destruction, life and death, hope and despair. The Star Weaver sailed on, its crew united and stronger than ever, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The journey had always been a risk, but now it felt like they were sailing into the very heart of the storm, a storm that would test their courage, their wisdom, and their unity like never before. The Star Weaver drifted silently among the ancient relics of the Tideborn, their massive forms casting long shadows in the starlight. The crew worked diligently, piecing together fragments of the lost civilization's history, their discoveries painting a picture of a society that had once thrived and ultimately fallen to the whims of the cosmic ocean. But as they delved deeper, they failed to notice the subtle hum that had begun to emanate from the artifacts around them. It started with a flicker. The ship's systems stuttered, the lights dimming for a brief moment before returning to full power. Ensign Rin frowned at her console, her fingers flying over the controls. "Captain, something's wrong. The relics, they're emitting a strange energy signature. It's like they're waking up." Alara's gaze snapped to the view screen, her instincts on high alert. "Pull back now." But before the crew could react, the relics began to glow, their surfaces pulsing with a rhythmic, almost hypnotic light. The hum grew louder, resonating through the ship's hull like a warning. Suddenly, the relics shifted, their movements deliberate and coordinated. What had seemed like lifeless debris moments ago now appeared to be part of a vast, interconnected defense system. "They are targeting us," Kale said, his voice tight with urgency. "This isn't just an energy signature, it's a weapon. The Star Weaver shuddered as the first blast struck its shields, the impact rattling the crew to their core. Alarms blared, and the lights flickered again, casting the bridge in an eerie, intermittent glow. Alara gripped the console, her mind racing. Evasive maneuvers. Reroute power to the shields. The ship lurched as it dodged another barrage, but the relics were relentless. Their attacks were precise, calculated, as if guided by an intelligence far beyond their understanding. Alara's thoughts turned to the Tideborn's chronicles, their mastery of the tides, their downfall. This system wasn't just defending the relics, it was protecting the secrets of the cosmic ocean itself. As the ship's shields began to falter, Alara realized brute force wouldn't save them. They needed to outthink the system. Rin, pull up the Tideborn's language. See if you can find a pattern in their carvings, something that might explain how to deactivate this. Rin's hands moved swiftly, her eyes scanning the holographic display. There's a sequence here, a kind of code, but it's incomplete. If we can fill in the gaps, we might be able to communicate with the system. Alara's mind raced, her thoughts a whirlwind of strategy and instinct. She turned to Kale. Take the helm, keep us moving. I'll work with Rin to decipher the code. The next few moments were a blur. The ship danced through the void, its movements frantic yet precise as Kale navigated the relentless barrage. Meanwhile, Alara and Rin pieced together the fragmented code, their hands moving in tandem as they translated the Tideborn's ancient language. Finally, Rin's voice broke through the chaos. I've got it, sending the sequence now. The relics paused, their glowing surfaces flickering as the code was transmitted. For a moment, the tension on the bridge was unbearable. Then slowly, the relics began to power down, their lights dimming until they were once again lifeless in the void. The crew exhaled in unison, their relief palpable. Alara leaned against the console, her hands trembling slightly. They had survived, but only by the narrowest of margins. As the adrenaline faded, a profound realization settled over her. The Tideborn's defense system wasn't just a mechanism, it was a test. A reminder that the cosmic ocean's power was not to be taken lightly. It demanded respect, humility, and a willingness to adapt. Alara turned to her crew, her voice steady but filled with quiet resolve. We've learned a lot today. The tides aren't just a force of nature, they're a reflection of our choices. Every decision we make shapes our journey, and every challenge we face is an opportunity to grow. From now on, we explore with that in mind, not as conquerors, but as students of the unknown. The crew nodded, their expressions a mix of exhaustion and determination. They had faced the unknown and emerged stronger, their unity unshaken. As the Star Weaver set its course for home, Alara stood at the helm, her gaze fixed on the stars. The cosmic ocean's mysteries were vast, its tides ever shifting, but she knew now that the key to navigating them wasn't just skill or technology. It was the wisdom to recognize their place in the grand tapestry of the universe. The journey had changed them all, and as the ship sailed on, Alara felt a quiet sense of purpose settle over her. The tides would always test them, but they would face them together, not as masters of the cosmos, but as explorers with a deep respect for its infinite mysteries. The Star Weaver hovered in silence, its engines idling as the crew stared at the massive, glowing relic before them. It pulsed with an otherworldly rhythm, its light casting eerie shadows across the bridge. This was at the heart of the Tideborn's legacy, the key to understanding the cosmic ocean. But as Alara stepped closer to the console, her hand hovering over the controls, she felt a weight settle over her. This wasn't just a discovery, it was a crossroads. The relic's surface shimmered, and the air seemed to hum with anticipation. Then, without warning, the room filled with a projection. A holographic figure, tall and radiant, its form composed of swirling starlight. The guardian of the tides, its voice resonated through the bridge, deep and resonant. You have come far, seekers of truth, but the path ahead is not for the faint of heart. To claim the ocean's knowledge is to face its judgment. Are you prepared? Alara's heart pounded, but her voice was steady. We've faced your trials. We've earned this. The guardian's gaze seemed to pierce through her, its tone softening but no less commanding. Earning the right to know is only the first step. The true test is in how you wield that knowledge. Choose wisely, Captain Elara Voss, for the fate of the universe may rest in your hands. The projection faded, leaving the crew in stunned silence. Alara turned to face them, her mind racing. The guardian's words echoed in her thoughts, a stark reminder of the responsibility they now bore. This isn't just about us, she said, her voice low but filled with conviction. The cosmic ocean is alive. It tests those who seek its power, and it punishes those who misuse it. We've seen what that looks like. The Tideborn's downfall is proof of that. Kale stepped forward, his usual calm demeanor replaced by a quiet intensity. So what's the plan? Do we take the knowledge and risk repeating their mistakes? Or do we walk away and leave it buried? The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. Alara's gaze swept the room, her eyes meeting those of her crew. She saw the trust they had placed in her, the sacrifices they had made to get here. She thought of the trials they had endured, the unity they had forged. And then she thought of the universe, of the countless lives that could be saved or destroyed by the power they now held. Her voice was firm when she finally spoke. We don't take the knowledge, we seal it. The cosmic ocean's power is too great, too dangerous. If it falls into the wrong hands, the consequences could be catastrophic. We protect the universe by leaving this secret where it belongs, hidden. The crew nodded, their expressions a mix of relief and respect. They had come so far, risked so much, but they understood the gravity of Alara's decision. This wasn't just about them, it was about something greater. As the Star Weaver prepared to leave, the Guardian's voice returned, its tone warmer now, almost approving. You have proven yourself worthy, not through conquest, but through wisdom. The cosmic ocean will remember your choice. Alara felt a surge of emotion, a quiet pride that came not from victory, but from knowing she had made the right decision. She turned to her crew, her voice soft but filled with resolve. This journey has changed us. It's taught us that the greatest power isn't knowledge, it's the wisdom to know when to use it. And sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is walk away. The ship's engines hummed to life, the relic fading into the distance as the Star Weaver charted its course for home. The crew worked in quiet unison, their trust in Alara's leadership unshaken. They had faced the unknown and emerged stronger, not because they had claimed its secrets, but because they had chosen to protect them. As the stars stretched endlessly before them, Alara felt a sense of peace settle over her. The cosmic ocean's mysteries would always call to her, but now she understood their true nature. They weren't just a force to be conquered. They were a reminder of the delicate balance between ambition and responsibility, between curiosity and caution. The Star Weaver sailed on, its crew united and stronger than ever, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The journey had been long and fraught with danger, but in the end, it had taught them the most important lesson of all, that the greatest discoveries aren't found in the stars, but within ourselves. And as the ship disappeared into the void, one thing was certain: their story was far from over. The Star Weaver emerged from the cosmic ocean's boundary, the familiar stars of known space, greeting them like old friends. The ship's hull bore the scars of their journey, each mark a testament to the trials they had endured and the lessons they had learned. Inside, the crew moved with a quiet purpose, their steps lighter, their camaraderie stronger than ever. The weight of the unknown no longer pressed down on them. Instead, it felt like a horizon ready to be explored together. Alara stood on the bridge, her hands resting lightly on the console as she gazed out at the stars. The journey had changed her in ways she could barely articulate. She had gone seeking answers, chasing the mysteries of the cosmic ocean, but what she had found was something far more profound: herself. The ocean had tested her, pushed her to her limits, and in doing so, it had revealed the strength she didn't know she had, and the humility she needed to truly lead. She turned to her crew, her heart swelling with gratitude. They had followed her into the unknown, trusted her when the path was unclear, and stood by her when the stakes were highest. They weren't just her team, they were her family. "We've been through hell and back," she said, her voice steady but filled with warmth. "But we're here. And we're stronger because of it. Thank you for believing in me and in each other." Kale stepped forward, his usual reserve softened by a rare smile. "You've led us well, Alara, not just through the ocean, but through the doubts and fears we all carried. That's what makes a true captain." His words carried a quiet weight, a recognition of the growth they had all experienced. The crew nodded, their expressions a mix of pride and quiet reflection. They had faced the unknown together, and in doing so, they had forged bonds that would last a lifetime. The cosmic ocean had been their crucible, shaping them into something greater than the sum of their parts. As the Star Weaver sailed through the familiar expanse of known space, Alara felt a sense of peace settle over her. The ocean's tides would always call to her, their mysteries whispering in the back of her mind, but she no longer felt the need to rush toward them, to prove herself by diving headfirst into the unknown. She had learned the value of balance between curiosity and caution, ambition and humility, and she knew that whatever lay ahead, she would face it on her own terms, with her crew by her side. The ship's engines hummed softly, their steady rhythm a comforting reminder of the journey they had shared. Alara leaned against the console, her gaze fixed on the stars. The cosmic ocean was out there, its tides eternal, its secrets waiting to be uncovered. But for now, she was content to sail the familiar stars, to savor the quiet moments and the bonds they had forged. As the Star Weaver glided through the void, its course uncharted, but its purpose clear, Alara whispered a quiet promise to the cosmos: "We'll meet again." And with that, the ship sailed on, its crew united and ready for whatever lay ahead. The journey had changed them, but it had also prepared them not just for the challenges of the stars, but for the infinite possibilities of the universe. The story of the Star Waver wasn't ending. It was simply turning a page, and as the stars stretched endlessly before them, Alara and her crew knew that their greatest adventures were still to come.